Hi everyone, my name is Boris. I'm starting PA school this fall, and this channel is all about helping you get into PA school. Today, I thought I would talk about my story, from graduating college with a 2.9 GPA and absolutely zero healthcare experience hours, to now, a few years later, when I'm finally starting PA school this fall. So, the story begins freshman year. I actually started out as an engineering student, industrial and systems engineering to be specific. And within about a semester, or as most engineering schools call it, it's a quarter, I found myself bored to tears. I just was not into the whole engineering process. My grades were okay. It's not that I was doing poorly. It's just that my heart really wasn't into it. And the first thing I want to say is this is absolutely nothing against engineering students or people who are engineers. Looking around the room here, I can see basically everything was made by people who are passionate about engineering. So I'm very grateful for people who do love that profession. I'm just saying it was not for me. So I specifically still remember freshman year sitting in my dorm room, taking a study break, and watching Scrubs, which was one of my favorite shows at the time. And JD, the main character, he was talking to this terminally ill woman, and she was talking about all these amazing experiences she had and all the skills she had gained during her long life. She spoke Mandarin, and she hiked like every peak out in Asia and everything, like just crazy stuff. And he was experiencing all this with her, and it was just a very special moment between the two of them. It wasn't even that the episode was focused on him treating her clinically. It was just the connection that they had made and all the great people that he was able to meet as a doctor. And so I remember that episode specifically because that's when I realized I was just more interested in people than I was in assembly lines or product optimization or even cars, which I still love to this day, but not enough to really focus my whole life and my work and dedicate my life to it. So what I realized then is I needed a human element, human connection in my work in order to motivate me to work hard and to actually be the best that I could be at something. So the next morning I decided, that's it, I'm going to look for a place to transfer out of this engineering school, and I'm going to be a pre-med, whatever that meant. So I didn't have a doctor in the family. One of my friend's dads in high school was a doctor. I never really took advantage of that. So I really didn't know what it took to be in medicine. I didn't even know what a PA was at this time. I didn't know much about nursing. I really didn't know. All I knew was this was interesting to me. I wanted to work with people. There it is. This is what I was going to do. And to an 18-year-old, that makes a lot of sense. So the very next morning, I start looking for a place to transfer that has a good PA program that's proven to get people into medical school. And finally, I found one. It was fairly close to home. It's called Allegheny College in Western Pennsylvania. And people who do well there ended up going on to med school and PA school and things like that. So the pre-med program there was pretty good. I also knew that I'd probably have to study chemistry and some biology courses, and then eventually things would all just fall into place and I would just be in medical school and then life would be great, right? Yeah, that didn't happen. So senior year finally came around and I found myself wrapped up in my classes, wrapped up in my senior project, and just having absolutely no idea what I was doing next. And honestly, not even being that worried about it. I was just focused on the small things in front of me, my classes, my friends, things like that. And so towards the end of senior year, a friend came to me and she told me that she was applying to PA school. And I had no idea what a PA was. I asked her, and she told me all about it and all about the requirements and their role in the healthcare field. And I thought, great, I can do that. 2 years instead of like 10? Absolutely. I'm in. Sign me up. And then she told me about the healthcare experience requirement. And then she told me my GPA probably wasn't competitive. And this was in 2011 when I was graduating. And it's even more competitive now. But even back then, my 2.9 GPA was not going to cut it. And so just as quickly as I fell in love with the profession, that's how quickly I fell out of love and got discouraged and was like, nope, that's not for me either. Keep trying. And so I ended up not pursuing that from that moment on. Fast forward 6 months. After working as a lab tech, after working as a bartender, I again knew that was time for a major change. My GPA that I graduated was still low. I had a ton of student loans to pay back. But that really wasn't the problem. I knew deep down that was not the problem. I knew what I really lacked was discipline, was guidance, was more people skills, was experience, was confidence, all kinds of things that I just had not gotten or not allowed myself, better yet, to get from my college experience, from high school, from anything up until then. So, long story short, I joined the U.S. Navy. What the service really taught me, above all, was to have high standards for my work. Nothing less than excellence was accepted in a lot of the places that I went and a lot of the positions that I held. So what I was taught was that anything worth doing is worth doing right and worth taking all the way. I learned the art of task completion. The path to success was broken down into baby steps, and that really gave me confidence as a person that I could accomplish something big. It was just laid out in front of me. Do A, do B, do C, do D, and then, boom, you're at your task, which seemed monumental at first. But when broken down, really did not seem that difficult. And like I said, that really, really instilled confidence in me like I had never had before. So, as I went on in the Navy, I slowly gained confidence in myself to have high standards in every part of my life. And eventually, to really believe that I could accomplish anything I set my mind to because I could break it up into baby steps. The bigger it was, the more steps there were, but I knew that I could break it up, I could organize it, I could set my mind to it, and I could do it. So the service really gave me confidence above all. For that, I'm honestly forever grateful. And it was an amazing, exciting part of my life, but that, above all, was the most important. I definitely would not be at this amazing part of my life without those lessons learned in the Navy. So fast forward again, a year before my contract is up, and I signed up for 5 years. So a year before my contract is up, 4 years in the Navy, I'm talking to a friend. We're talking about career goals. And I told him, my background. I told him what my bachelor's is in, my grades. I told him all kinds of stuff. Not that this guy was in the medical field or he was terribly knowledgeable about all the different fields, but he was, a little bit older. He was in his 30s. He'd been around the block. He knew like a few different things, more than I did. And he just said, why don't you be a PA? That just makes the most sense. It's everything you want. You could finish in 2 years. You have a lot of the background probably. Go be a PA. And so right then, again, I had forgotten all about the PA profession that I, briefly researched in senior year of college. But right then, again, it clicked. Yeah, I could be a PA. Yeah, that sounds good. And so, again, I started researching it, except this time much more. And I read testimonials of PA students, of practicing PAs. I learned about where the profession came from. I learned about what people thought that a PA's role was and what it's going to be and how the profession is really moving into all kinds of new avenues. And I got excited. I really thought that it could be something I could see myself doing. So what I did next was I found a few Army PAs to shadow. I found them at Tripler Hospital out in Honolulu, Hawaii, where I was stationed. And these were all emergency room PAs, and then one of them was an occupational therapy PA. He wasn't an occupational therapist, but he was working in occupational therapy somehow. But he was a PA. And so I shadowed all these people, and after about a month of doing this and, spending nights and weekends at the ER, just basically standing over these people, watching them do their work, I was hooked. I was really hooked. This was everything I had ever hoped for. I knew this was what I wanted to do. I loved the scope of practice. I loved the autonomy, but also that there's an attending available to always teach you more, or if you ever need help. So you can practice, you can get really good at things, but there's always something for you to learn that's more. I also really loved the team aspect, and I really thought, this is how healthcare should be practiced. This is something I want to be a part of. I really do want to be a PA. And so after that shadowing experience, I was sold. So that's it. I wanted to be a PA, and this time nothing was going to stop me. I had confidence in myself. I knew that this might be a long road. I had no idea how long of a road at that time, but I thought, all right, this might be difficult, but I can do it. And I really want to do it, so I'm going to do it. And nothing's going to stop me. Just a little check here. This was about 3 years ago at this point. And I'm now starting PA school in 6 months. So it was a long road. So I found a PA school here in Syracuse where I really needed to be for family reasons. And at that time, the GPA requirement was 3.0, or it may have even been 2.75. It was something that wasn't terrible, and it was something that I had qualified for. I had like a 2.98. I thought, okay, if it's a 3.0, that should probably be okay. You can round up, right? And they had a fairly low requirement for hours, at least the minimum requirement. And I also spoke with the dean briefly, and she told me that my research experience had actually counted as healthcare experience hours. She gave me, I think, 50%, and that still put me over the minimum. So I thought, great, that was easy, right? I have the grades, the minimum grades, but I have the grades. I have the hours. They're not exactly direct patient care, but hey, she said I have enough. I meet the minimums. Of course they're going to let me in. I'm going to be a veteran. I get all these experiences. I have all this other experience that I could apply to the PA profession. Why wouldn't they let me in? Well, lo and behold, that year, this particular school cut off their applicants at 3.3 GPA. So obviously the website said minimum 3.0, but that year they got even more applicants. They all had very high GPAs, so they had to cut it off somewhere. They only had 75 spots. They got 2,000 applications, so let's say they could only look at 400. And let's say there were 1,600 people below 3.3, so they cut off the bottom 1,600. They can only look at 400 applications. Something like that. Obviously, these numbers are completely arbitrary, but my point is, of course, they had to do that. They get a ton of applications, and they can only look at so many. So I was also thinking, but my personal essay was great. My experience is great. They probably can't spend the resources to look at every single person on a case-to-case basis and think, yeah, we'll take a chance on that guy with the 3.0 GPA, or actually the 2.98 GPA. Whereas here's the 3.4 GPA person with more experience, and I mean, obviously, they had to choose somebody who's more qualified. So I'm rambling. Long story short, my application was not even looked at the first year I applied, and that's when I realized this is going to be a lot harder than I thought. But anything worth doing is definitely worth the work. And so instead of getting discouraged, I mean, I wasn't happy. I was heartbroken. But I wasn't discouraged. I knew this is definitely something worth attaining. And the more I researched into the field, I realized it's very popular. It's an amazing job. You never really meet an unhappy PA. Or if you do, it's probably the only one in like a 100-mile radius. And so obviously something that is as amazing as a career as this is going to be competitive. So what did I do from then? I wanted to know what's going to happen between now and the next application cycle that will make me competitive enough to get in next year. So on my next visit home, I scheduled a meeting with the dean of this school because for reasons I'll get into in another video, I had to be in one area. So I only applied to schools locally here. And so I met with the dean in person. We had a great conversation, and basically the thesis of what I asked her was, how do I go from point A to point B? Point A being now, the hours I have, the GPA I have, the experience I have. Point B being somebody you could see yourself accepting into this program. And she told me, look, your grades, I mean, they're A's and B's, some C's. Like, they're not abysmal. You don't need to give up on this dream. You can be a PA. You know, you're not a terrible student. Your experience, yes, it's lacking. You definitely need some hands-on. But you've been in the medical field. You know the jargon. You've worked in a lab. Like, there's definitely good things about your application. You just need more. So what she basically told me is get your grades up and get some experience. And at this time, I was still finishing up my last year in the Navy. Obviously, I couldn't get very much. I got as much shadowing as I could, but that was around a full-time work schedule. And so I got to thinking, like, what do I do? How do I take myself from point A to point B? How do I get to be from the person whose application wasn't even looked at to the person that's looked at, then given an interview, and then looks good enough in the eyes of the admissions board that they actually accept this person and think, okay, this might actually be a good provider. We're going to put our faith into them. We're going to give them this training. And we think this is somebody who we would respect as a physician assistant. And so I got to thinking what that would take. And I found basically two options of how I could get my grades up. That was number one. If I was even to get my application in front of the eyes of the admissions committee, my grades had to come up from a 3.0 rounded up from 298 to at least a 3.3. So I quickly did the math and realized that was impossible. I'd have to take like 2 years of classes, get all A's in them, and then it might get up there a little bit. So again, I scheduled a meeting. I spoke with the dean over the phone because at this point I was back at my duty station. And I told her I had 2 ideas. One, I was going to go to a community college, just take a ton of classes, take a full load until my GPA came up enough, maybe for a year and a half. I told her I was going to retake classes that I didn't do well in. And also maybe get an EMT certification and work on an ambulance part-time while I'm going to school. How does that sound? Would that get me to where I could possibly be a competitive applicant? What she told me was, yeah, that could work. And that's definitely, we see a lot of applications like that, and some of them get accepted, and we like EMTs, and we definitely like people who have, taken the time after undergrad to improve their grades. That's fine. But what we really want to see, what we really, really want to see as an admissions committee, is we want to see you take a full load of science-based courses that you have not taken already, especially hard ones. Take all hard science classes, a full load of them, and get A's, get all A's. That's what we want to see. That's what we need to see you do to have confidence in you to handle our curriculum, because this program's hard. It's really hard. So that's what I need you to do. As far as getting your experience, maybe do that part-time. Maybe do that after you've gotten your grades back up. But that's what we really need to see you do. And so I was actually a little surprised. And so I went back to my duty station and I had a few more ideas. I did some more research. I called the dean back. I scheduled a phone appointment. I was back at my duty station at this point in Hawaii. And so obviously I couldn't meet with her. And so I told her, okay, look, I have 2 ideas. One, again, I'm going to go to school full-time at a community college, take all hard science classes, get all A's, I'm going to do well, and maybe work something part-time. Or I found this post-bacc. It's a dedicated 1-year-long pre-medical post-bacc program in the area. It was actually at Cornell University, so it was fairly close to Syracuse. And it's basically made for people who either are changing careers and they need prerequisites for medical school, or they didn't do very well in undergrad, not well enough anyway, to go to medical school, and so they do this post-bacc to get their grades up to show that they can handle a rigorous science-based curriculum and really get prepared for medical school. Not a lot of people who do these programs are pre-PA students, but the few that have gone there have been very successful in getting into nurse practitioner, PA, veterinary, all kinds of other basically pre-medical programs. But primarily it was for medical school. So I told her, I'm going to do this program and then worry about the hours later, or maybe do them around the schedule. I don't know. She told me, you know what? You should do that. And the way she talked about the program, the dean was even more just impressed, and I would even say excited about the program than just somebody going to community college and doing some extra coursework. This was actually something that takes someone who's not competitive for a pre-medical program and gives them the opportunity to prove themselves to be someone who is. And so, of course, I knew that's what it had to be. That was the harder option. That was by far the best option, so that's the option I took. And again, fast forward, this program started in summer, fall of 2016. It ended in, is that right? No, it started in summer, fall of 2017. It ended in summer of 2018. It was 2 semesters. And I went into this program head on. I knew that I was not the smartest student there. There was much smarter people at Cornell, obviously, than I was. People who had actually been in classes much longer than I have, at least in the last few years. I hadn't taken a full college course load since 2011. So this was, 6 years later, even more than that. And I had been outside of science, outside of academia. Thinking about it retrospectively right now, it actually sounds crazy that I thought I could do this. But I basically told myself I was going to beat my head against the wall. I was going to learn how to study no matter what. I was going to be definitely not the smartest, or probably in the, top 90% there. Like everybody there was going to be smarter than me. I knew that. But I knew I was going to be the hardest working. At the very least, I was going to be the hardest working and the most organized. And that actually worked. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what my GPA was in this program, but it was good. It was definitely good enough to impress the admissions committee, and long story short, I was asked about it at my interview. People there seemed to be happy that I chose the harder option and actually excelled. And like I said, long story short, here I am starting PA school in 6 months. So that was definitely the best option. While I was in this program, what I realized after a semester of doing fairly well, and I did better second semester because I really got in the groove, but after a semester of doing fairly well, I realized, okay, I can do this academic thing. I know how to study now. I can actually do it fairly well with very difficult coursework and a ton of information. Like it's possible. I can handle it. What I realized looking around at my classmates is I am nowhere clinically. A lot of these people, and these were pre-meds, these weren't even people trying to get patient care experience for PA school. They all wanted to go to med school, but they were passionate about it, and so they took jobs as ER techs, EMTs, medical scribes. There was a couple of medical scribes there. There were some surgical techs. And so I realized, like, I can learn things as well as these people, better than some, worse than others, and it still doesn't matter clinically because they have just a ton of experience, hands-on. They've seen things, they've seen x-rays, they've seen labs, they know them off the back of their heads. Is that how you say that? They know them like the back of their hands. And so, yeah, like, I knew clinical experience. I finally understood, it clicked, why PA schools need people with strong clinical experience, because you're going to be, 2 years isn't enough to be a competent medical professional, no matter how hard a program is. That's why the programs are based on people who have been in the field for at least a while. I think the average is 1,000 or 2,000 hours minimum, which is about 6 months to a year of full-time work in the medical field. So that's why they need this. They need people to know meds. They need people to know labs. They need people to know how to talk to people. They need people who already have at least some idea of bedside manner. And I had none of this, even with academics in the bag, basically, like I was thinking at least. I had none of this. So I realized immediately after graduation from this program, I needed to get my hands dirty and I needed to get some medical experience. So what did I do? I signed up to be a scribe for, now it's Scribe America. Back in the day, like 2 months ago before the company was purchased, it was Physicist Scribes. It's one of those national ER scribe companies that basically teach you how to be an ER scribe, how to transcribe notes in real time in the emergency room, following a physician around with a laptop, basically. And so I signed up for that. They hired me. And basically a week after graduation, I started full-time immediately, just dived right in to be an ER scribe. I did that for 9 months until another opportunity came along, and I decided to be a medical assistant because you can actually get hands-on experience. But I'm going to ramble for another 20 minutes about that. The point is, I knew I needed experience. I went and got experience. And by the time I applied, I think I was somewhere around maybe 1,000 hours total. 1,000 hours of scribing plus a few other things in the past. So it was good. I was competitive. I had a high post-bacc GPA. I had a good amount of hours, definitely not as many as some, maybe more than others. And then I also had all of the diverse experiences that I had in the Navy. And I had a good story. And finally, that was enough to get me an interview. And then other things that I'll talk about in later videos were enough to actually get me a spot in the class, doing well in the interview as well. So, like I said, I'm sorry that video was very long. It's a long story, and it was a very long road to get here. From graduating in 2011, vaguely knowing that I wanted to practice medicine somehow, some way, not knowing anything about it or the steps to take, to finally here with the opportunity to go to school to be a medical provider, to be a physician assistant. So it's been a long road. In my next video, what I'm going to do is, since it's now March, and I believe CASPA opens April 6th or 7th, I'm going to look it up before the next video, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I'm applying this cycle. And what I'm going to do is show you how to research a school, at least what I would do. So I don't sit on an admissions committee, I'm not even a PA student yet, but I've done this for a long time now, trying to get into PA school, and I finally succeeded. So I'm just going to show you my process, what I would do in your shoes, still trying to get into PA school, how I would research a school, how I would see if it's a good fit for me, if I'm a good fit for it, what I would do to approve myself, how their stats are, what are my odds of getting in, all things like that. Things that if you are applying this cycle, you should be doing like yesterday. Because now at this point you have a month if you want to submit CASPA as soon as it opens. Or you have, 2 months if you still want to submit very early. And honestly, guys, the earlier the better. So I'm rambling again, I'm tired. So anyway, what I'm going to do is just from the ground up show you how I would look at selecting schools to apply to, since the application cycle is opening in 2 or 3 weeks. So that's going to be the next video. I really hope I'll see you there.